So there I am, it's late at night and the sirens go off again. We've had 2 consecutive nights of tornado watches, tornado warnings, sirens screaming through the neighborhoods, those emergency alerts lighting up your phone like your house is on fire, and the weather app showing a swirling mess of red and purple crawling right across Lake County. And I'm sitting there doing the very rational thing that most of us do in those moments, which is standing at my window, squinting in the dark, and asking myself, is that a funnel cloud or not? What's going on here? And then I sit there and I think, why here? Why Lake County? Are we just unlucky? Is there something about this specific place on the map that makes tornadoes love us? The short answer is kind of yes, and the longer answer is genuinely fascinating. A little alarming and involves the Gulf of America, the Rocky Mountains, Canada, Lake Michigan, and a massive shift in weather patterns that researchers say is moving Tornado Alley right in our direction. Let's break it all down. When most people think Tornado Alley, they think Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, the Great Plains. That image of a single farmhouse sitting under a massive funnel cloud with nothing but flat open land in every direction, that's the mental picture most people have. And that picture isn't wrong. The classic region absolutely exists, but it has never told the full story. And here's the thing about Lake County that most people don't know. Illinois is situated on the northeast edge of Tornado Alley, the tornado-prone area that extends approximately 400 miles on either side of the line from Fort Worth, Texas to Detroit, Michigan. This area is the battleground of warm, moist air from the Gulf of America and cold air coming down from Canada, resulting in the world's largest breeding ground for tornadoes. And here's the part that hits closest to home. The greatest frequency of tornadoes in Illinois occurs in a wide band from Madison and St. Clair counties in the south, northeastward to Lake and Cook counties. Lake County, named specifically as one of the most tornado-frequent parts of Illinois, which is already one of the most tornado-frequent states in the country. Illinois averaged 54 tornadoes per year based on 1991 to 2020 data. 54 tornadoes a year, and Lake County sits at the northeast end of the busiest corridor. So when those sirens go off, again, that's not bad luck, that is geography. To understand why Lake County gets hit, you need to understand what creates a tornado in the first place. It's not random. It's a very specific recipe, and we happen to live inside a pantry that stocks exactly what that recipe calls for. Here's the basic formula. You need warm air, moist air moving up from the Gulf of America. You need cold, dry air pushing down south from Canada or east from the Rocky Mountains. You need those two air masses to collide. And you need the land underneath them to be flat enough to let them interact without a mountain range getting in the way. Illinois sits right in the heart of where warm, moist air from the Gulf clashes with the cool, dry air and even drier air from the Rockies. And when these air masses collide, especially during the spring and summer months, they create a perfect recipe for severe thunderstorms. These thunderstorms then can develop into supercells, rotating thunderstorms. And what's a key ingredient for tornado? Rotation. Flat terrain along these paths allow the winds to move relatively uninterrupted at contrasting altitudes until they run into one another. The angles at which they collide tend to create unstable air and wind shear, two big factors that favor tornado formation. Wind shear is the key term here. When the wind changes speed or direction as you go up in altitude, it's what sets the air spinning. And when you have that rotational air inside a powerful thunderstorm and the right conditions, that spinning tightens, stretches downward, and touches the ground. That's your tornado. Lake County is flat. It sits at the intersection of the Gulf air pushing north, Canadian air pushing south, with the jet stream, high altitude river of fast moving air, steering the whole show across the Midwest. And we are right in the crosshairs. Now, doesn't Lake Michigan protect us from this? I've heard this one a lot. The idea that living next to Lake Michigan gives us some kind of shield, that the cool air off the lake dampens storms before they hit us. It's an appealing theory, and it is also, unfortunately, only partially true, and the exceptions are exactly the situations we're going to talk about. Here's how a meteorologist put it. The cooler breezes off of the Great Lakes are what he called low-octane fuel. Thunderstorms like high-octane fuel, which is warm, moist air. Thunderstorms typically become weaker as they approach or go over Lake Michigan, coming into contact with that low-octane fuel. So in mild storm situations, yes, the lake helps, the storms weaken, the cool air acts like a speed bump. But then comes the crucial caveat. In some situations, an atmospheric conveyor belt of warm air, moist, unstable air sets up at about 4,000 to 6,000 feet above the ground in the form of a low-level jet stream, with winds out of the southwest at about 35 to 50 miles per hour. When this conveyor belt sets up over southern Wisconsin, it doesn't matter whether Lake Michigan is there or not. You're going to have your tornadoes. Translation: When the atmosphere is truly volatile, when the conditions are right for a major storm system, Lake Michigan's cooling effect is essentially irrelevant. The storm is too powerful to care about the lake. One NWS meteorologist put it bluntly: people in Chicago are complacent because there's an urban legend that the lake will steer a tornado away or that the buildings are going to protect you. On those types of days where there's a weak lake breeze, that will have a minimal effect because the environment is so volatile. It can produce long-lived storms and tornado potential. Some of the tornadoes that have occurred in Illinois go 25 plus miles. 25 miles! That's not a localized event. That's a tornado that starts near Joliet and ends up approaching the Wisconsin state line. When the atmosphere wants to produce a violent tornado, Lake Michigan is not going to talk it out of. If you need convincing that this isn't just theoretical, that the risk in our region is real, here's the historical record. The only F5 tornado ever to strike the Chicago area hit Plainfield on August 28, 1990. The only F5 tornado ever officially recorded in the United States in the month of August. It formed near Oswego and took an unusual southeasterly path through Plainfield, Crest Hill, and Joliet. On its 16-mile path, it killed 29 people, injured 350 more, and caused $165 million in damage. 29 people in one storm in the Chicago suburbs on a Tuesday afternoon in August. Following the Plainfield tornado, the famous meteorologist Ted Fujita stated that a tornado in the Chicago Loop, the most developed part of the city, couldn't be ruled out. He said, "We should not assume a false sense of security in our city. A large, violent tornado might manage to smash through the loop, damaging skyscrapers and causing showers of window glass onto the streets." That's Ted Fujita, the man they named the tornado damage scale after, saying the loop isn't safe. If he wasn't going to let Chicago be complacent, he certainly wasn't giving Lake County a pass either. A study by the National Weather Service Chicago found that a violent F4 or F5 tornado strikes the Chicago metropolitan area on average once every 9.8 years, with F3 and F2 tornadoes much more common at once every 4.5 and 1.3 years on average, respectively. Every 1.3 years on average, an F2 or stronger tornado hits the Chicago metro area. That includes Lake County. That's not a freak occurrence. That's a statistical expectation. Here's the part of the story that I think people in Lake County most need to hear. The tornado threat to our area isn't just consistent, it's growing. And researchers, real meteorologists at major universities in NOAA, are saying it loud and clearly. Illinois as a whole experienced a record-setting year for tornadoes in 2024, with 142 tornado touchdowns, beating the previous record of 124 tornadoes in 2006. And ongoing research suggests that Tornado Alley is shifting from its traditional bullseye in the plains eastward into the deep south and the Midwest. Tornadic storms appear to be happening more frequently in these areas. 142 tornadoes in Illinois in a single year. That's the most in state history. And in 2023, the year before, we had 121, the second most ever. Back-to-back record-setting years. Illinois led the nation in number of tornadoes in both 2023 and 2025. Dr. Victor Gensini, a meteorology professor at Northern Illinois University and a severe storms expert, said over the last 40 years, the number of tornadoes has gone down in states like Texas and Oklahoma in what's known as the nation's traditional tornado alley, while areas further east like Tennessee, Indiana, and Illinois have seen an increase. This is real, it's documented, it's not speculation. Here's why it's happening. The traditional tornado alley in the Great Plains is expected to become drier and more desert-like. That shifts the ingredients which form tornadoes farther east and leads to more tornadoes in the Chicago area. As Dr. Gensini explained, so the same tornado event that happens in Kansas that may have occurred in a wheat field is now happening in southern Cook County, and the entire track of that tornado is impacting people. A tornado in a Kansas wheat field is a tragedy. A tornado trekking through the suburbs of Chicago through Lake County is a catastrophe because we have hundreds of thousands of people living in its path. Research suggests that the dry line, which divides the wetter eastern U.S. from the drier western U.S., has moved east about 140 miles since the late 1800s. The dry line can be a boundary for convection, the rising of warm air and sinking of colder air that fuels the storms. 140 miles eastward drift. That's the dry line moving towards us. The conditions that used to favor tornadoes in western Kansas and Oklahoma are creeping east, Missouri, Illinois, Lake County. Here's one more piece of this that I think is underappreciated, and it hits close to home when you're lying in bed at midnight and those sirens go off again. Tornadoes typically peak between 3 and 7 p.m. in Illinois. Late afternoon, early evening when the atmosphere has all day to cook up instability, and when the classic textbook tornado happens. But the tornadoes that Tornado Alley's eastward shift is producing, population density in the new tornado zones is roughly 3 times higher than the traditional Tornado Alley, and these storms often strike at night, making them deadlier. At night, when you're asleep, when you don't see the sky turning green, when the only warning you get is the siren, and even then you might not hear it through closed windows and a box fan. Tornadoes tend to occur in the afternoons and evenings, with 50% occurring between 3 and 7 p.m., but the other 50%, any other time, including midnight. That is why those 2 consecutive nights of sirens in Lake County are no joke. It's not an overreaction and not something to shrug off. The watch is real, the warning is real, the threat is real. I'm not going to be preachy about this, but since we're here, let me say 2 quick things. First, have a plan before the sirens go off. An interior room on the lowest level of your home, no windows. If you're in a mobile home during a tornado warning, get out and get to a sturdier building. That's not optional. Second, the warnings you get are better than they've ever been. The 1990 Plainfield F5 was particularly deadly in part because there was virtually no warning time. The event led directly to major changes in forecasting. Those changes, the Doppler radar improvements, better storm spotting networks, the emergency alert system on your phone, all of that came from learning painful lessons. Respect the system that was built from those lessons. When your phone screams at you at 1 a.m. with a tornado warning for Lake County, that's not a bug. That is the entire system working exactly the way it was designed to work, because 29 people died in Plainfield in 1990, and the country said, never again if we can help it. So, is Lake County usually prone to tornadoes? By raw frequency compared to, say, rural Kansas? No, we're not Oklahoma. We don't get one every Tuesday. But are we squarely inside the geographic zone where Gulf air and Canadian air collide, where the terrain is flat enough to let those forces meet without obstruction, where the historical record shows major tornadoes hitting our broader metro area, and where a documented eastward shift in tornado activity is pointing more storms directly at us? Yes, absolutely yes. The last 2 nights of sirens that you heard wasn't paranoia. That was the atmosphere doing exactly what this corner of the country has always been vulnerable to, and what it is increasingly set up to do more of. Stay safe, Lake County. Know your plan. And when the siren goes off, don't just stand at the window looking at the sky. Go downstairs. I'll see you later. Dreaming of Disney but worried about the cost? Meet Just the Essential Disney Hacks. This compact guide is your ticket to a magical vacation without the villainous price tag. Learn insider tips on saving money on everything from tickets to meals. Discover how to maximize fun while minimizing your expenses. Don't let budget fears keep you from creating unforgettable family memories. Get Just the Essential Disney Hacks today and start planning the Disney trip you've always wanted at a price you can afford.